Hello everyone, welcome to the day 3 of the Digital Health Week campaign organized by Cyber Jagrithi in collaboration with South Indian Medical Students Association, SIMSA and Bleed with Pride. Today we are going to talk about medical ethics and the data privacy. So how we'll be having a little understanding about medical ethics and how to protect your personal data in healthcare setting. Medical ethics involves examining a specific problem using a clinical case and using values, facts, and logic to decide what the best course of action should be. A single company may possess the personal information of millions of customers, data that needs to be kept private so that customer identifies stay identity stay as safe and protected as possible, and the company's reputation remains untarnished. You can say data breach, but data privacy isn't just a business concern. You, as an individual, have a lot of stake when it comes to data privacy. The more you know about it, the better able you will be to help protect yourself from a large number of risks. So, for this, we are having an amazing panelist, Katyani Goswami, Council Chair of Corp. She is an honorary scholarship recipient of Madras Medical College. She is an aspiring neurosurgeon in her third year of undergraduate study, a fierce proponent of refugee rights and peace. She has been working on several projects involving diving ahead a transnational activity on disaster medicine and refugee rights. She has also undergone an international training on disaster management. Welcome, Katyani Goswami. Next, we have Shatabdi Niyog, council member of COP, always going by the motto, be the change you want to see. What an amazing quote. She is a first year medical student by education and dancer by passion. She has a deep interest in the field of human rights, peace, and youth development and aspires to work towards its betterment through research and spreading awareness about it. Welcome, Shatabdi. Next, we have Sweta Muthuji, council member of PRC Corp, a third year medical student at Madras Engineering College. She represents various medical student organizations in her college and has been using this quarantine to proactively get involved in the community through volunteer work and awareness program. What an amazing work you have been doing, Shwetaji. Welcome to the program. And without any delay, now I would hand it over to Kalyani ji to continue take forward this session. Over to you, Kalyani. Katyani, sorry.
Thank you so much for that. That was a very good introduction. Thank you so much. We'll be starting with medical ethics and data privacy. We have formulated some of the things that people can use as general public and not very specific to medical students. So I hope this workshop helps you. Can we go to the next slide? So in this workshop, we have the next slide. Yes, thank you. So in this workshop, the major things that we will be focusing on is ethics, medical ethics, data privacy, and patients' rights in privacy. So we'll be starting with ethics. What exactly are ethics? At its simplest, ethics is a moral system. So it's also called moral philosophy. It is the discipline concerned with what is morally good and what is bad. So there is a slight difference between ethics and morals. This is something that you must be seeing or hearing every day. Ethics is more society based, and morals are something that you have personally. Ethics are also something that you use more on the professional front, while morals are something that you use more personally in your house or in personal issues. You would say that something is unethical in a professional setting or in a cultural setting, but morals is something that you do with your own conscience. So that is about ethics, and ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos, which means custom, habit, character, or disposition. Next slide. So, why ethics? What is the reason? Ethics can provide a moral map. Ethics does not give you right answers, it gives you multiple answers. Now, one reason to study ethics is that ethics is inescapable. So, whatever actions you have, it will have a consequence, and you need to choose those actions very carefully. In some cultures, for example, it is unacceptable to eat meat, and in some cultures, meat is allowed. So, in some cultures, eating meat is unethical, and in some cultures, it is ethical. So So ethics does not give you a very definite answer. It can vary from culture to culture and profession to profession. Like it might be unethical in a certain company or in a certain firm or a certain profession to date your colleague, or you have to dress a certain way to be ethical to that profession. So that is why you really need to understand ethics to live in a society with everybody. Next slide. Now, what is medical ethics and why medical ethics? So, in the 1930s, medicine was a paternalistic profession. By paternalism, I mean it restricts one's autonomy, so one's right to choose. Patients back then didn't have right to choose their own treatment. They were just used for experiments, for treatment, for any kind of new drug that had to be introduced. And this was done by doctors for their own benefit. So back then, medicine was sort of paternalistic. Patients did not have many rights. They could not tell the doctor that they did not want a certain treatment. It was very the right to autonomy of patients was almost negligible back then. But after the World War II, the world learned the horrors of German doctors. You might have heard about many German experiments. There were Russian experiments happening uh, in the concentration camps, and they were conducting deadly scientific experiments in which subjects lost their life, or subjects were living lives after that which weren't in a vegetative state, or not the same, not normal. So now there are efforts that are being taken to right these wrongs, and it is enshrined in the Nuremberg Code. So, what is the Nuremberg Code? This was a code which was aimed to protect human subjects from enduring the kind of cruelty and exploitation that the prisoners endured in the concentration camp. So, this was made specifically during the after the World War II, when people found out about the German concentration camps. Next slide. So now you have medical ethics. What exactly is medical ethics? Medical ethics is concerned with the obligations of the doctors and the hospital to the patient. So if you're coming with some form of disease or disorder, then it is, as a doctor, I will be obligated to tell you what kind of treatment, what are the alternate treatments, what is your diagnosis. I cannot hide critical information from you as a patient. And I cannot lure you into taking some other form of treatment just for my own good. So, the health profession, we have a certain set of ethical principles that apply to medicine. They are beneficence, non maleficence, you have autonomy, consent, truth telling, confidentiality, preservation of life, and justice. Out of these, there are four that we solely work around in medicine. And these are respect for autonomy, beneficence, non maleficence, and justice. Now, I'll let it be there for 5 seconds, and you go through these words and you try to understand what each word means. You have autonomy, you have beneficence, which sort of might rhyme with benefit, so you can understand maybe the benefit to patients. Non maleficence, which is non evil, so do no evil, and then justice. Justice to the treatment, justice to the patient. Can we go to the next slide? So autonomy is basically patients having the right to determine their own healthcare, their treatment. They can decide the type of, if there are alternative treatments, then they can decide which kind of treatment they want. Justice is distributing the benefits and burdens of care across society. So it's not just, you can't completely put the burden on the patient, you can't completely put the burden on the doctor. It is divided. Beneficence is doing good for the patient. So, as a doctor, your aim should always be to do good. And if you can't do good, then non maleficent means making sure that you do no harm. If there is something that you don't understand of a certain case, or if there is a diagnosis you're not able to make, just to keep that patient under you, you cannot make a wrong diagnosis and you cannot give them wrong treatment. So, if you can't do good, don't do bad. Can we go to the next slide? So, how has ethics changed the way we perceive medicine, or how has it changed things that are related to medicine? Something that happened a long time back is that the birth control was not allowed. It was considered unethical in many parts of the world, including the United States. So, until the 20th century, birth control of any kind was discouraged. So, that meant that you could not use condoms, any type of contraceptive pills, any kind of thing that will stop the conception of a child if there is fertilization. So, the work of activists such as Margaret Sanger opened the door for families to manage their resources and reproduction. There was reproductive technology that was improved and introduced, and condoms, pills, all this was moved from the back shelf of the pharmacy. So, when by the back shelf of the pharmacy, I mean you needed some kind of prescription to get these condoms or medication. But then it was moved to the checkout counter, or it was, as of now, if you go to a pharmacy, it is over the counter drug. So you can just ask for it and they will give it to you without a prescription. Can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So there was certain cases that which very drastically changed how medical ethics works and what we understand by ethics in medicine. There was one such case was the news of Tuskegee, the case of Tuskegee, and there were other exploitative experiments that were happening in the United States, which prompted researchers only around 1980s. So up until 1980s, there were experiments being conducted unethically all across the world, in Russia, in Germany, in the United States. Also, in the 1960s and the 1970s, hospitals began to routinely use ventilators, feeding tubes, and other technologies. Now, for the ones who do not understand medicine, these kind of interventions, these equipments are for life-saving interventions. If you're putting a ventilator, you are basically saving that person's life because they won't be able to breathe otherwise. It was up to, so then sometimes these equipment or this technology couldn't save the patient, or it was difficult to save the patient using this technology. So you had to move on to someone else who probably required it and was having a higher probability of surviving. So for that, it was up to the hospital-based doctors, often in the intensive care units, to decide when to remove life support. Now, this put them in the uncomfortable position of deciding who should live and who should die, and deciding what is futile care. And this brought on a lot of emotional trauma. There were issues against with the patient's family, with other healthcare workers who deferred the kind of treatment that was given. And that is why we have many battles in history, uh, medical battles that were fought. For example, the cases of Karen Ann, Nancy Cruzan, and Thierry Chiavo. So these were some patients who were in permanent comas and the life support had to be removed. So medical ethics, in a way, it has been hand in hand. Medical ethics has changed, and the way we have laws for euthanasia and how to treat patients have changed. So can we go to the next slide? One famous case was the case of Tuskegee. It was in the United States. It happened in 1932 back in Alabama. So what happened was they got a group of 600 impoverished African American sharecroppers from the county of inside Alabama, and of these, 399 had latent syphilis, and there was a control group of 201 men. So by control group, I mean these people were normal. They did not have latent syphilis. They had no trace of syphilis. So these were people who were not infected. So as an incentive for participating in the study, these people were promised free medical care, but they were deceived by the health service. They were told that they will be given medical care, the disease will be treated. But instead, they were given placebos. Now, placebos are drugs or treatments which actually don't do anything. They are very they have it's just like a small capsule which will have no medicinal property. It'll probably be like a sugar tablet or something of that sort. And you will be asked to eat it, and you will be told that this will have some form of therapeutic use, but it'll have no therapeutic use. So that is placebo, ineffective methods, and diagnostic procedures as treatments. So all of this were falsified. These men who had syphilis were never informed of their diagnosis, despite the risk of infecting others, because we know syphilis is a disease that can be contacted through sex. And the fact that the disease could lead to blindness, deafness, mental illness, heart disease, bone deterioration, and collapse of the central nervous system and death, despite of having all these critical symptoms later on in life, they weren't told what the diagnosis was. They were just told that they were diagnosed with bad blood. And back in the time, there wasn't the internet or there wasn't that many resources, especially for the African Americans, to go and cross check with what their diagnosis was. So these men were initially told that the study was only going to last 6 months, but it was extended to 40 years. The men were never given adequate treatment for the disease, even when penicillin, which was the drug of choice for syphilis in 1947, when it came out as a drug of choice, the researchers did not offer it to the subjects. There was an advisory panel that sat much later on this case to go through what happened, and they found that nothing showed that these subjects were ever given the choice of quitting the study, even when this new highly effective treatment became widely used. So these people who were used, these participants used in the study, were never allowed to leave. Next slide, please. Now we have the Shiavo case, which will be taken up by Shweta.
Hi everyone, my name is Shweta. I hope you can hear me. So I'll be talking about the Shervo case. As Katini had mentioned, this is one of the ethical dilemmas that was faced in the 1990s. So Terry Shervo was a 26-year-old woman who, in the year 1990, she sustained a cardiac arrest. Now the thing about cardiac arrest is it basically stops the blood flow to all the organs in your body. And there are certain organs which are very sensitive, like the brain, for example. There's a golden period of time within which you must restore blood flow if you want the brain to go back to being normal. This woman, although she was successfully resuscitated, they had they were too late basically, and so she had massive brain damage because of lack of oxygen to her brain, and because of that, she was left comatose. This happened in 1990. After this, for 2 years, the doctors provided her with life saving support and equipment that would, like a feeding tube and a breathing tube and all that, that basically kept her alive in a persistently vegetative state. Can we have the next slide? Yeah. So the incident happened in 1990, and for 8 years they had tried, but nothing was happening, and she was not reviving from her coma. So in 1998, this case was started. She had a husband who thought that if she was alive, like if she could speak and talk, she would not want to be living in this vegetative state, and that she would rather, not live and die. And so the husband wanted to remove life support from her so that she can at least be at peace in death. However, her family members disagreed with this, and they thought that there was some hope for her for being revived, and they did not want to stop her life support. This provoked massive national attention when it went to the courts. It took place over the course of so many years. There were 14 appeals, numerous motions, petitions, and hearings in the Florida courts. And at one point of time, it became such a big deal that the then President of the United States, George W. Bush, also got involved. In the end, it took these many years, and in 2005, finally, it was agreed that her feeding tube be removed. And 2 weeks after her feeding tube was removed, she expired. Next slide. Okay, so we have discussed about the different rights that patients have, like the right to choose their treatment, the right to know what is going on with their bodies, what experiment is being conducted, and all that. But of late, we have realized that some patients have been misusing these rights, and there are some situations in which this becomes dangerous. A very good example of this is anti vaxxers. Many of you might have heard in Western countries, many people think that vaccinations are in fact dangerous and they may cause autism in children. For some reason, they think that pharmaceutical companies are trying to make money off their children or something like that. And therefore, they do not vaccinate their children, like very, very fundamental and very important vaccines, like the measles vaccine, MMR, and such, which took years of research to be made and generated. They will be like, will not vaccinate our children. This is dangerous because unvaccinated children can spread the disease to others, and vaccinations like measles and other infectious diseases work at full capacity only when there is herd immunity. That is, when everyone is vaccinated, everyone will be immune. And if one child is not vaccinated, that increases the risk toward the other children as well. This is one of the situations in which patients exercising their rights excessively becomes dangerous. Next slide. Okay, Shatabdi will be taking from here.
Speaking on data privacy. So we know about privacy. It is, in the broadest sense, it is the right of individuals, groups, or organizations to control as to who can access, observe, or use something that they own. Now, a very common everyday example of such privacy is that the locked front door of a building, which prevents others from entering it without explicit permission. Now, with the exponential growth of global information, which is driven by new technologies, there has been an increased amount of personal data which has been collected, used, and analyzed, which also means that there is an ever increasing number of accidental or incidental data breaches and misuse. And this has led to the demand of data privacy, the right to control how information is collected, with whom it is shared, and how it is used. Now, data privacy, it basically describes the practices which ensure that the data shared by customers is used for its intended purpose only. Now, there are various data privacy laws which are prevalent all over the world, and some of the examples are such as the US Privacy Act of 1947 or the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And as such, there's a data privacy law which has been prevalent in India since 2000, and that is the Information Technology Act. Now, this act was passed by India and is first cyber law, and it provides the legal infrastructure for e-commerce in India, and it deals with cybercrime. Now, this act was enacted on June 9th, 2000, and was notified on October 17th, 2000. Next slide, please. So there are various sections which come under this act, and some of them are as follows. The first, we have the section 65, tampering with computer source documents. Now, if a person knowingly or intentionally destroys or alters or causes others to do the same to any computer source code used for a computer program or network, it might lead up to 3 years of imprisonment or a fine up to 2 lakhs. Then we have section 66, that is hacking with computer system. Now, if a person with the intent to cause wrongful loss or damage to the public or any person by destroying or deleting any info which has been residing in a computer resource or affects it injuriously by any means is said to commit hack. And this is a very serious offense, and this might lead to an imprisonment of 3 years or a fine up to 5 lakhs. Then we have section 66B, receiving stolen computer or communication device. And this leads to an imprisonment of up to 3 years or a fine of about 1 lakhs. Then we have section 66C, that is using password of another person. Now, a person, if they fraudulently use password or a digital signature or any other unique identification of another person, and this it leads up to an imprisonment of 3 years or a fine up to 1 lakhs. Then we have section 66D, that is cheating using computer resource. And this leads up to an imprisonment of 3 years and or a fine up to 1 lakhs. Then we have 66E, publishing private images of others. Now, this is a very common issue which we see especially among the young group, where a person captures and publishes images of a person's private parts without his or her consent, and which is a very serious offense. And this leads up to an imprisonment of 3 years and or a fine up to 2 lakhs. Next slide, please. Then we have section 66F, acts of cyber terrorism. Now, if a person denies access to an unauthorized personnel to a computer resource, accesses protected system, or introduces contaminants into a system with the intention of threatening the unity, integrity of India, it leads to life imprisonment. And then we have section 67, publishing information which is obscene in electronic form, like pornography. And this is a very serious offense and leads to an imprisonment of 5 years or a fine up to 1 crore. Then we have section 67A, publishing images containing sexual acts. And again, this leads to a life imprisonment or say an imprisonment up to 7 years and a fine up to 1 crore. Then last we have 67B, that is publishing child porn or predating children online. Now, if a person if a person publishes sexually explicit content of a child, say a child who is below the age of 18, it leads up to imprisonment up to 5 years, 5 to 7 years, or a fine of about 1 crore. Next slide, please. And from now, Katyani will be taking over. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shatabdi. Thank you. So, as Shatabdi was talking about the sections, we have a certain cases that got national coverage. So, one of this case, if you remember, is on 19th of November in 2012, a 21-year-old girl was arrested from Palghat for posting a message on Facebook. She was criticizing the shutdown in Mumbai, which was for the funeral of Bal Thackeray. So, Bal Thackeray is a very eminent figure in Maharashtra. And there was another 20-year-old girl who was arrested for just liking this post. They were initially charged under Section 295A of the Indian Penal Code, which is for hurting religious sentiments, and the Section 66A of the Information Technology Act, which Shatabdi just spoke about. Later, the Section 295A was replaced by Section 505, which is promoting enmity between classes. So, a group of Shiv Sena workers, which is the political party backing in Maharashtra, had vandalized a hospital run by the uncle of one of the girls. Around January, on the 31st of January 2013, the local court dropped all the charges against the girls. So through this, you can understand that cybercrime is taken very, very seriously in our country, and you cannot just go around posting or liking anything. Next slide, please. Another such case of Section 66A was earlier in 2012 itself. There was a freelance cartoonist, Asim Trivedi, who was arrested under Section 66A of the IT Act and Section 2 of Prevention of Insults to National Honor. What he did was his cartoons that he created and published were depicting widespread corruption in India and were considered offensive. So things like this are also taken very seriously if you are doing anything to tamper the national spirit or the national image, either internationally or on the Indian front. You can be punished, and there are sections which are having punishment, and you will be charged for it. So can we have the next slide? So data privacy in a healthcare setting. Shweta will be taking it from here. Thank you.
Hi. So now let's talk about data privacy in the healthcare setting. What ensures that your data is kept private when you go to a doctor's office? One of the most important patient rights is right to confidentiality. Now let's talk about what this covers. Basically, when you go to a doctor, whatever details you tell or whatever details he elicits from you, including your medical records or even any personal details that you might have revealed to him during the course of your interaction with him, must be kept confidential, and the doctor is not allowed to speak of it or to post it in any research paper anywhere without your permission. The doctor can talk about the medical details just to discuss the case without mentioning your name and identity, like keeping you completely anonymous. He can just mention the details of the case, but he cannot violate your privacy by telling people or by publishing anywhere that you have this disease or that he has learned this thing about you. This is basically what confidentiality entails. Now, there are certain situations in which this can be exempted. Like there are situations in which a physician is required to break confidentiality in order to abide by the law. Let's talk about some of these situations. First, can a physician discuss the medical details entrusted by the patient with their close relatives? Technically speaking, and as per law, they cannot. They are not allowed to talk to anyone about a person's disease other than that person themselves. However, in India, we often see that when we go to a doctor's office itself, we go with our relatives, and it's kind of implied that the relatives that you bring with you to see the doctor are allowed to know about your details. So it is, your consent is kind of implied there. So it happens very commonly in India, and it's not that much big of a deal. However, if you're explicitly saying that you do not want your relatives to know, then the doctor is not allowed to divulge these details to even your close relatives. The next question, can a physician disclose secrets? No, I'm sorry, yeah. Can a physician disclose secrets of the patient learned in the exercise of their profession in a court of law under orders of the presiding judge? The answer is yes. In case of a criminal or a civil case, if the judge orders that the physician be present at court and demands to know what happened, if the medical records of the patient is significant in the case and the judge is asking you that you must say this, then is one of the situations in which the physician can break privilege, can break confidentiality, and reveal those details. The next question, should notifiable public health diseases be kept secret as privileged information due to the stigma attached? This is a very interesting situation. So I'll explain this by using an example that we can all relate to now. So now as we are in the middle of a pandemic, we know that it is essential that if someone is tested positive for COVID, all of their contacts are informed about it so that they can take the necessary steps. So even though the physician, as per confidentiality, should not be telling anyone that a person has been infected with this disease, because it is a notifiable public health disease, in this situation, the physician does have an obligation to notify anybody who might be affected. For example, if a person is living in a hostel and he has contracted COVID, the physician has the duty to contact the hostel warden and inform him to take the necessary steps to prevent it. Similarly, if a partner contracts any sexually transmissible disease like syphilis or gonorrhea, then the doctor has an obligation to make sure that the partner of the patient is informed that this person has this disease. Next question. Is it the duty of a physician to communicate any criminal offense to the law enforcing authorities? If, while you are examining a patient, you come to know that because of the facts that you are now eliciting from the patient has committed any sort of criminal offense, then yes, you do have an obligation to report that to the law enforcing authorities. And with that, I think we come to the end of our presentation. Is there anything any of the other moderators would like to say? Sorry, panelists.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sweta, for that. I think others are not available. They are facing some internet issues, maybe. So we'll go on with and see if we are having any questions. I think we are having Katyani. I had her. Yeah. So there's one question by one participant. He says, suppose something bad has happened. Some private life of that person has happened, and he approaches a patient or a doctor. Maybe suppose they have a baby in the something like that. So if they are asking for any kind of sort of help, so generally what people do, they ask for calling up parents and such. So what kind of thing is allowed or not allowed? Do you want to comment anything on that? Did you get my question?
No, can you explain the situation properly?
Okay, so what happened is a couple, a boy and a girl had been intimate relationship, and now the other girl is pregnant, and they approached the hospital for any kind of sort of help or something, for not having the baby. Say abortion kind of stuff. So, and in that the doctor sometimes might ask that I need to call your parent, talk to your parent or such. So are there any guidelines or anything in such situation?
Yes, absolutely there are. That's a very good question actually. So if in India, legally, any girl below the age of 18 participating in sexual intercourse, it is considered rape, whether or not it was consensual or not. That is irrelevant. Any girl under the age of 18, if it comes to notice, it is considered as statutory rape. Okay. So let's just keep that in mind. So if this girl and boy here, if the girl is above the age of 18, then legally the doctor is not allowed to tell her parents about this thing that has happened. I don't. His own morals or ethics do not matter here, but legally he is not allowed to reveal this information to her parents, especially after she has explicitly told him that she doesn't want to. However, if the girl is below the age of 18 years, then it creates a little bit of a moral dilemma because, as I said, you can break privilege if some criminal offense has occurred, right? So technically, a girl under 18 years who has conceived, that means it's a case of statutory rape. And even if she tells you that it was consensual, it is still, in India, not in all other countries, but in India, it is considered as rape. So, I mean, morally, I would say it is still not necessary for you to inform her parents, but later there might be legal repercussions. Like later, if the girl goes and files a case against the guy accusing him of rape, and then they call you saying you examined this girl and you knew that she was younger than 18, why didn't you report it? Then it might become a problem for you. So that is a decision that a doctor has to take on his own. But even then, there is no reason to tell her parents. You might have to inform the law enforcing authorities. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, that's a perfect answer, I guess. Okay, so we'll go on with the next question. So suppose when I think there are several tablets or when the use of condoms or such. So what all policies or what are the rules and regulations that we have regarding that in India? Anyone would like to comment on that? Katyani or Sweta?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question? So sorry.
Rules and regulations regarding usage of condoms. Shweta, can you answer that?
Okay, yeah, I think Katyani is not, the connection is not proper. So you're asking for rules and regulations regarding the usage of condoms. I don't believe there is any rules or restrictions to the usage of a contraceptive. They are
Yes.
Over-the-counter items that you can go to a pharmacy and purchase. There are some contraceptives that require a medical prescription, like a cervical cap or stuff like that. or IUDs and stuff, but a condom is not one of those. You can simply go to a pharmacy and ask for it, and there is no rules or regulations or any restrictions for that.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so one last question and then we'll try to wrap it up. So regarding the data of health data, so what the kind of data is regarded as health data, and what kind of data is not health data? Or I can say, let me dig down, make the question simple. So what kind of data is regarded as crucial health data and which should be protected?
Okay, that is also a good question. So technically, the patient's medical records, as in when they came to the hospital, what tests they have taken, the results of those tests, any scans, any diagnoses that have been made, these are all considered as the patient's medical records or their medical history. If they've been living with the condition for a certain amount of years, the treatment that they're taking, all of this is regarded as their medical data. However, so this is protected. The physician is not allowed to divulge this information, but their personal details that they have revealed to the physician during the course of treatment is also protected. So your physician might ask you about certain lifestyle details when he's trying to diagnose a disease. Like, for example, if he thinks that you might have contracted a sexually transmitted disease, he might ask you whether you are sexually active, and that is a completely personal piece of data, but that is also required to be kept confidential by the physician. So basically, whatever he learns about you in his clinic, like while examining you or while interacting with you as a doctor patient, should be kept confidential.
Okay, yeah, that explains pretty much. Katyani, would you like to add anything to that? I'm not sure if you're there. If you're speaking, please unmute and speak. I think she's having some internet issues, and that was pretty much, a lot of questions were already answered. If there have been many questions like what are the rules and regulations and all. So I think the IT laws which are there for that. So do you? I think this is one last question which I have. So what are the medical standards, or are there anything which are taught in college, which you are supposed to follow, and that anything you would like to focus on that? Shweta.
Okay, this is like a very extensive question. There are a lot of things that we are taught. The one thing that we are taught as soon as we start with clinical postings is to always respect the patient. Like, just because the patient is there in the room and they've come for to consult you does not give you the right to like touch them or examine them without their consent. You should always introduce yourself, tell them what you're going to do, ask them for their consent, and then begin examining them or any of that sort. And what else? We should be honest with the patient, as in we shouldn't exaggerate, nor should we make the seriousness of the disease seem less than it really is. Like, you should never promise a patient with a life-threatening disease, like, everything's going to be okay, you're going to be fine. That is, you're not supposed to do that, because you cannot assure that and you cannot promise that. So that is there. What else? You are supposed to respect your fellow colleagues, like the doctors that you work with. You are allowed to take their opinion on certain cases or whatever, as long as you make sure that the details, like the personal details of that patient, are not mentioned. Like, when we're taking a history, we say like a 78-year-old man. That's all we say about the personal details of that man. We cannot reveal his name, where he's from, what he does, any of that. And only sometimes when like things like his profession might be required for the case, like there are some occupational diseases, like coal miners are susceptible to certain lung diseases and all that. So only in those situations that can be mentioned. Otherwise, you can discuss with your colleagues. You have to respect your colleagues and those who work with you. I think it's a lot, but I mean, this is what's coming to me at the top of my head right now. So if there's anything specific you want, you can ask.
Sure. That's pretty much, and I thank you a lot for taking time and answering all the questions, probably all. So due to lack of time, we are unable to take many questions. I believe the other questions have been already answered during the presentation. So I think those are not required as of now. And I thank you, Sweta, Shatabdi, and Katyayani for taking out time and spending with us and spreading awareness about this medical ethics and data privacy laws which are in specific to India, because a lot of times we see, they say ethics, but we do not mention the boundaries for that, and a lot of things, people do. If I also search on India on internet, it says it is in India or outside of India. Bloggers do not mention the jurisdiction over here. It's very good to see that you have specifically mentioned them with respect to India and spreading awareness on that. Once again, thank you so much, team SIMSA, the Sweta, Shatabdi, Katyayani, for sharing your thoughts with us, and have a great day ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.